Okay, so I think I'm recording again now, hopefully. So you can see I just tried to stop recording, so I won't do that, and I'll just minimize that, and I'll kind of explain some of the things I have up on my screen right now. So I'm sharing my whole screen. You can see I have, of course, a browser up. I've got the curriculum to the exam right here that is up, so you can see all the main topics. They've also got subtopics like high availability, automation and implementation, and then under that, these are all the actual main topics on the exam, not just the kind of umbrella section meta information about what's going to be on there. So clearly, I'm going to have to know how to set up radius and local user accounts. I'm going to have to know a lot about firewall filtering, just anything like that. So I'll kind of look at the meta strategy I've come up with for dealing with this exam. There's a really good book by Scott Young called Ultralearning, and he explains 9 good things you can do to learn something faster and more complete. And one of those things is meta learning, developing a strategy, learning what other people have done to learn, having a good sense of how long on average it takes somebody to learn it, having a good sense of where those resources are. So that's kind of the work that I have completed so far when it comes to this exam. So your number one source for any exam, of course, is going to be the curriculum on the exam. No matter what you're doing in any class, you want to make sure that you have this bookmarked or saved somewhere so you can go back to it, and that really, if you want to do really well in the exam, you make sure that you can do a little bit of a skim or review of each topic before it's introduced, because if you're hearing it for the first time, it's really just going to go right over your head. But if you did a little bit of a preview or a skim into it and just kind of know the basic concepts, then you can build those connections more. Because a little bit about brain science, neurology, neuroplasticity, if you've heard that term before, you're actually adding stuff to your brain the same way you would add stuff to your body when you lift weights. So in order to do that, there's a whole process. It doesn't happen automatically. So you're really going to have to constantly review, and it's a whole process. So a really important part of that process is just knowing what you want to learn, so you don't go off into any tangents and you don't spend a lot of time on things that are not going to be on the test. So what I did is I went into my Google Drive, and if I click Show Path here, I have a folder called JNCIE-SP, and I have all of the topics on the exam. So I started with VPNs just because why not? I had just recently gotten a promotion at work, moved it up into another job, and the job I was in before that, we did a lot with VPNs. So I thought it'd be a good way to kind of get started. So you can see I actually did complete all of the layer 2 VPNs as well as the layer 3. So what I'm on now is this inter-AS VPNs. So here's my strategy. These are all, if we go back to that curriculum and we go to VPNs, and then we go down to inter-AS VPNs, we can see carrier of carriers and inter-provider. So going back to my Google Drive, carrier of carriers, inter-provider. So you can see I've made folders for each of those topics in the curriculum. And for me, that just really helps to kind of have that meta learning, that meta information of, oh, this is what I need to know. This is where that falls under. So if I'm ever trying to troubleshoot some issue and I have a better kind of sense of what I need to look at based on the kind of issue it is. So you can see I completed this carrier of carriers. So right now I'm working on this inter-provider. So under here I have a file, And inside that file, I went and I preloaded every single topic here. So BGP, you can see I've got all the subtopics for BGP as well. If you open up the official curriculum, here they are. Here's all the subtopics. And then with each of that, so for routing policy, I've got another folder for each of those topics. So if I click into one of these, I've got a file there as well. And you can see that in those files, I found free, publicly available information. And this could be anything. This could be from a blog. This could be from a YouTube video. This could be really anything you find online that doesn't have some kind of copyright or restricted access. And luckily for me, and luckily for you, if you're working on a Juniper cert, their entire tech library not only is available online for free, you actually get it during the test. So this is something I'm not sure about, whether or not it's this actual tech library here or whether or not it's some different database. But it's really important to kind of know how to use this, because if you're ever in the exam and you kind of know what you're looking at, you kind of know where you want to lean towards, but you just can't remember the specifics, you're just escaping you. You have the ability to just go and search that topic and spend 5-10 minutes reading up on it and hopefully jog your brain into what you need to know to solve that. So that's going to be something that's really going to kind of help you get those extra few points if you ever kind of fall off the bandwagon with something, or if you've got extra time. I mean, time management is obviously a very important component of a test like this. But if you've got a little bit of extra time and you skipped a whole section because you just couldn't figure it out, you might be able to even just pull up this doc and learn it for the first time. So hopefully it doesn't come back to that, but that's a really good reason why it's important to kind of use documentation like this as perhaps your first source of knowledge, because you're going to have access to this during the exam. So you want to get really familiar with using that. Okay, so where I left off before I started this video series is I was configuring interprovider layer 3 VPN option A. So what I had been doing is just kind of getting it under my fingers. I think that kind of helps me just to have it under my fingers a little bit first. I was a supplemental instructor in 2015, 2014, just student help, teaching students. I wasn't like a professor at the two-year college, but a lot of students really found what I did for them helpful. So I definitely was serving in a teaching role. So I was a paid student help. The instructor essentially was the job role I was doing at the time. And I definitely told all of my students that the most important thing you can do is not necessarily memorizing the commands and getting it on your fingers. It's understanding what the commands actually do, the concepts behind them, because then you can kind of make those like judgment calls. You can kind of say, I don't know what specifically is happening here, but I know in general what this kind of seems like. And because of that, I can investigate it and I can figure out what it is. Whereas if you're treating it in a way where, okay, I know these 5, I know these 10 commands. Well, do you know when you would need to enter those commands? Do you know why the device isn't accepting those commands? Do you know? So what I'm saying is, I have always considered it, and I still consider it now, to be much more useful to have a robust knowledge base about the kind of higher level conceptual knowledge, as opposed to specific knowledge such as what are the commands or stuff like that. It's obviously important to know what the commands are, but you always have, in just about any networking equipment you have, as you can see here, if I want to take a look at something, you've got this question mark here. So if I have a high level concept understanding of networking in general, I can say, oh, I know what ARP is. ARP is to map layer 2 addresses, MAC addresses with layer 3 addresses, IP addresses. So I'm troubleshooting an error, I'm troubleshooting an issue where I can't ping or something like that. So ARP might be something that would be beneficial for me to look at. Whereas if all I have memorized is the command show ARP, well, when do I need to enter in the show ARP? Like, let's say that my route is not being learned across a topology. Well, is show ARP, if all I know is show ARP, I might be doing that command in a bunch of places, not realizing that it's local to layer 2. So there's really only a few places in the topology where it makes sense to do a show ARP command. And if I don't have that kind of high level understanding of what it means to be at layer 2 or layer 3, what it means to have what a MAC address does, what an IP address does, why you need to map a IP to a MAC address, those sorts of conceptual information, if I don't have those kind of things really well understood and mastered, the specific knowledge I have is not really going to be as effective or useful because I won't know when, where, or why to even apply it. So I kind of gave that spiel because I kind of want this video to just be a motivator for me continuing to work the way I had been, just because I need to kind of work and keep working every day. It's like, there's also the other side of the coin where doing something is always better than doing nothing. But I mean, of course, with a grain of salt, like if you're exercising and you can over-exercise and injure yourself. So that's obviously, there's a big grain of salt behind that. But yes, ideally I would study the concepts and, you know, study 8 hours a day and do everything perfectly. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. So my goal today with this video now is to just continue where I left off and do kind of a live coding session, essentially. I think the next few videos I do are going to be essentially live coding sections, but instead of doing codes, I'm just going to be copying these commands over. And then hopefully the real value behind this is that it all goes horribly wrong. And then you've got to troubleshoot, oh, did I enter a typo? Is there a problem with the documentation? You know, a lot of these documents actually have pretty serious errors. So one thing I like to do when I find a really serious error is, nope, it wasn't very helpful for me because it told me to do something that was very clearly wrong. So, and then you can put in and you can give them a very clear, detailed information about why it's wrong, why it's not. They give you a response back saying they opened a ticket, but they don't actually engage with you, or they haven't with me so far. But it just helps you to kind of understand your confusion, why it hasn't worked, and maybe it can help jog your memory. The other thing I do that's really essential is I have a coworker who's working on this as well. He just took the test recently. He didn't pass, but if you've put the time into this, even if you don't pass, you're really going to be an expert. This takes a lot of time and energy to even attempt the test. So he's been very helpful in that regard. There's some things where they'll say, or where you'll kind of go off on your own, you'll add an extra troubleshooting step. And it's like, oh, well, the lab's broken, it's not letting me do that. It's like, well, no, they just weren't expecting you to attempt to ping across the topology from the source address where you are pinging from, because the lab didn't have this extra step that you set up. So you'd have to redistribute your directly connected routes into the routing protocol as well, or specify the source address where you're pinging from in order for it to work the way you expected it to work. So that's another thing this can serve as, is kind of a cringe factory, because I think cringe can kind of help you a little bit. Like if you look back at something you did and it really makes you cringe, be like, oh, like for me, like I'm sure as I continue to, as I watch my own videos, which I'm not really planning to do much, I'm going to look at kind of how I look and be like, oh man, I got to try a new style. So I think that can be very helpful. And I think in the context of the JNCIE-SP, these messages can really help you understand your own understanding. And you will be emailed these messages back after you have submitted them. So you'll have kind of a running record of what you were thinking when you did the lab. Okay, so let's continue with this. Where I left off, I had finished the PE router. So PE router, you're not going to have a lot of extensive configuration on. All you're doing is you're setting up the interfaces, of course, with their IP addresses and just the routing protocols. You've got to have your IGP here, OSPF, so that you can distribute the routes. But then you're just going to have MPLS and RSVP. So these are not for routes, they're for labels. So you're not going to have in your PE router, you're not going to be even dealing with the routes that you'll see from the CEs and the PEs. You're just going to handle those, process those as labels. So you really don't need as much configuration to do that. On the PE, let's take a look at that because I finished that before. You're going to have a lot more configuration. So show configuration, click display set, click no more. So you can see there's a lot of configuration on this. We've got MPLS configured on the interfaces, both facing the CE and facing the P router. We've got RSVP and MPLS set up so it can send those routes as labels. We've got BGP connection all the way across the autonomous system. So this is to ASBR1. So there's a BGP connection from here directly to here. As we know, BGP is TCP, so it's not like OSPF or EIGRP or other routing protocols where you can only do it with the neighbor across the link. It rides on top of a of a TCP connection, and it can be formed across multiple hops. You do need to add a special command to do that, multi-hop, but that is something that can be done with BGP because it rides on top of TCP. That cannot be done with other routing protocols. So here's a great feature of GNS. This is, I used to use Eve NG, and I liked it for the most part, but there were some things like you have to, for example, shut down your devices before you can change the cabling, which for me was kind of a deal breaker. And the other deal breaker is I think you can sniff with Wireshark the same way you can here, but it just wasn't as nice. Like it's so nice to just pull up a Wireshark sniffer like this and just really dive in and see what's happening. That is absolutely invaluable. But you can see we've got OSPF. So when I click into a OSPF packet, so let's do ip.proto equals 80, I think it's 88, it could be 89. No, it's 89. Yeah, there we go. And the reason I'm doing this is because there's different kinds of OSPF traffic, and there is OSPF traffic that can be sent unicast. So you can see here all my traffic is destination 224. But if I were to go and clear my OSPF neighbor on this PE1 to P1, so clear OSPF neighbor. And actually one, it looks like, nope, these are still, so this is just a kind of refreshing those routes and making sure that everything is all similar. I think could be wrong about that. And let me put out a disclaimer too. This video series is really meant to be more for myself than a general wide audience, and kind of it's cringe content basically. I want to look back in August, because I'm kind of planning to take this in September, and just kind of look at how far I came, and then anything I really said that was wrong, maybe understand why it was wrong at that time, and have a much better understanding, and really kind of work to become an expert along the line, instead of really expecting myself to be an expert now. I do have the prerequisites for the IE, but even with those prerequisites, the IE is a significantly higher step. So, but I will demonstrate what it looks like to have that other kind of traffic that you won't necessarily get unless you're sniffing out by the actual protocol number, because OSPF is a protocol, TCP is a protocol, BGP is a protocol as well, but it's one that rides on top of TCP. So let's go ahead and do that. Clear OSPF neighbor, interface 001. I've got this topology pretty nicely designed so that 0, 0 is always facing to the left, 0, 1 is always facing to the right, unless of course you go down to this bottom row here. So hopefully that will reestablish quick show OSPF neighbor. So yep, we've got the neighbor here. Don't know why it doesn't seem to have showed up in the packet there. So I cleared, maybe I need to clear the subinterface. So it's still in state full, so that kind of leads me to believe that it actually didn't go ahead and clear. So maybe I can just clear the database, and remember that I'm in the lab here, so this is definitely something you would never ever want to do in production. If you're in production and you've got a problem with OSPF and your first instinct is to clear your routing table or something like that, yeah, don't tell your coworkers. Well, tell your coworkers, but be prepared to be laughed at pretty hard. Okay, so we will take a look at that again. It's still in full, so I'm going to just go ahead and do the surefire way. So this is even worse. Well, this is probably not even as worse, to be honest, because if you're in production, you're clearing your OSPF neighbors, you're affecting the whole device. Whereas if I just go set disable, I'm only affecting that one link. So the other thing to know, if you don't have a lot of experience in production and you have mostly experience in the lab, so you really got to understand that when you're in the lab, you are forming what's called a council connection. So when you're in production, you're going to be using SSH. Hopefully you're not using Telnet, you might, but you're doing what's called an in-band connection. So you're accessing that device the same way one of your customers is accessing that device with traffic, except for they're just going straight through the device. You're actually stopping at the device to use its management capability. You're going to set up special ACLs, you're going to set up stuff so that your customers can't do that, but you're still interacting with that device in a similar way your customers are, which is different from a console connection, which is called an out-of-band connection. You're not interacting with it the same way. You're using a separate, and this is something I can actually show. I'll perhaps do a more extensive video on this, on my lab hardware, I can actually show you where you would enter the device if you are using an in-band connection versus where you would enter the device if you were using an out-of-band connection. There are actually different ports with different form factors. So when you're using virtualization like this, you can kind of get the wrong idea that, oh, I'm using in-band even though you're in out-band. And if you do something dumb, like I just did, clear OSPF neighbors or shut down a port, you're good, nothing happens. But if you're on the job and you do that, you're not even going to be able to get back into that device. You killed it. It's gone. They're going to have to call, some schmuck who has been working 12 hours, hates his life, hates his job, and he's going to have to go out and recover that device, and his whole day is gone. And you're going to owe that guy at least a drink or whatever for doing that. So that's just an important thing to understand for anyone watching this video who wants to have professional experience in this, but unfortunately does not really get a good understanding of what it means to be in-band or out-band and what the consequences of being in-band are if you make mistakes. So, okay, so now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to bring that port back up. So roll back one, compare. And this is another thing, so I'm used to being in-band because I work on the command line quite a bit, or at least I used to in my old position. So I always do, so you might think, oh, you didn't do anything. You just went into configure private, which is another thing to know. I won't even explain this, but if you're not using configure private on a Juniper, you're doing it wrong. That's all I'll say about that. But if you sometimes see me go in and you think, oh, that's weird. Why did he just do a show pipe compare? There's no reason to do that. That was really strange. It's because you want that little bit of extra pause before you hit the commit, because the commit's gonna have immediate changes that you cannot undo if you're an in-band, unless you have boots on the ground or you yourself can go and revert those changes out of band. So here you can even see I intended to bring that port back up, but this commit would have actually changed the host name on this. So that's definitely not something I want to do. So I'm going to roll back 0. And now if I do another show pipe compare, you can see I'm no longer making that. So I'm going to go ahead and do, so this run command is just the same as Cisco do. I can do commands from like privilege exec. I mean, there's no such thing as privilege exec in Juniper. The permissions are different. Like they do permissions a little bit differently. But this prompt has different things you can do than your configured prompt here. You can't make configurations from this prompt, which is not a completely accurate thing to say. You can set like the CLI timeout. You can make configurations here, but you can't make configurations that are as impactful, which again is something you've got to kind of understand isn't entirely true, because like you can reboot the device. That's like the most impactful configuration you can make, and that happens at this prompt. But anyway, one thing that is true is you cannot run commands from this prompt in this prompt here, but you can do the opposite. You can run commands from the chevron prompt. You can run that while you're in the configuration prompt. So configuration mode, it says right here, entering configuration mode. So I'm in a different mode. I'm in configuration mode. And it doesn't say what mode this is, but if you want to run commands from that mode in configuration mode, you just use this run. So we're going to take a look at the interfaces. And we're going to verify that I actually did go ahead and disable that interface. And it looks like I did not. Another thing to notice to understand with virtualization is sometimes it doesn't show this accurately just because the link is virtualized and it's not like on a real device where it's really easy to tell whether it's up or down. So you might see misinformation here every once in a while. It's just an eccentricity of working with GNS and working with virtual equipment. But I'll certainly go in and see if I can get that to shut down, because that's going to be the best way to show OSPF traffic being sent both to a multicast address and to a unicast address. So if I shut down G000, so I did set, I need to do edit first. Yeah, you can string commands together. You can just do set interface, oops, or disable. You can just do that. One thing I like to do though, like you can see, yeah, that takes, so I'll roll back 0. One thing I like to do though is just kind of go into the edit mode, because as I was talking about before, the differences between in-band and out-of-band, the last thing you want in production is just to sit down and go, you know, on the keyboard, because you really got to understand what you're doing. You got to think about what you're doing. You got to know what mode you're in. You got to know what interface you're modifying, because there's really severe consequences to not knowing that. Not only do you have to ruin someone's day, if you're lucky, you know, if that person's not you and you've got to like travel out or fly somewhere, not only is that a possibility, you can tank actual real traffic, and you can bring really essential services down for people like bad people are really depending on, or even just inconvenience a lot of people. Like it's really important to, when you're dealing with vital equipment that is essential for it to be up, that you're in the right frame of mind and you're not taking things less seriously than they deserve to be taken. So this is a reason why you might see me a little bit inefficient on the command line, or kind of take that extra step, or you might be like, oh, he's not using this special shortcut that makes things really fast or easy. It's like, well, it's because the background I came from. If you're taking special shortcuts, if you're doing something and you hit that enter key, you could be causing a really serious problem for a lot of people. So yeah, let's go ahead and shut this down then. And go back and commit that. So now hopefully we'll see it change here. Yep, so, oh, it looks like I shut down 00, so it's not going to affect the OSPF traffic on the link that we're monitoring now. So I'm going to roll that back. And see, this is another great example. I'm in the lab, nothing happens, but if I were in the production, if I were at work, I really wouldn't want to be doing something like this, making a video. I wouldn't want to be talking to a coworker. I want to be as focused, as in tune as I could possibly be, because if I did something like this, I shut down the wrong port, the whole customer's service is gone, or my connection is gone, and we got to call up that guy is going to be grumpy with you. Like, it's really important to have your mind in the game when you are in production. So being in the lab is really I think one thing I would say to everyone watching this video, have that mentality in the lab too, the best you can, because whatever you do in the lab, you're probably going to be doing in production unconsciously. So really, anything you do in the lab, treat it like you're in production the best you can. Obviously, I can't just not make this video and use my lab if I want to make a video and use my lab. So I'm going to be obviously doing things a little bit differently. But to anyone following along, if you see a cool new command, great, learn it. It might be interesting. It might make your lives easier. But really, if you don't feel comfortable, if you need to focus, just do what feels right for you. Make sure you're doing the right things, and make sure you're not going to cause a problem for the people who rely on the services you're providing. So now that I rolled that back, we can see the port is back up. So let's go ahead and do the correct port. Let's do it all in command, in one command. GE001.0 disable. So now I can commit that. Another great command to know is commit check. So let's say I don't know if my config is right. I tried to add an interface to MPLS, but that interface is in a routing instance. So can it be added to MPLS? Or do you have to add it to MPLS within the routing instance? I don't know which one works or not. Just do commit check, and it will tell you whether or not your configuration is valid without actually putting it into effect. So that's going to be a really important tool to know, because as I was talking about before, yes, it's important that you're being careful on the command line. It's important that you, when you're in band and when you're in production, that you do all the right things and you don't make mistakes. But at the same time, it's important that you learn and you expand and you know what you're doing. So if you just never do any exploratory command, I'm too afraid on this. I won't even do a show configuration because, oh, look, there's a syntax error. The box is going to explode. Oh no, there's more syntax errors. Everything's going to explode. Nothing's going to work. You know, you're not going to grow. You're not going to understand what you're doing. You're not going to get really vital information you need in order to do a good job. So just kind of understand what things are dangerous, what things are not dangerous, and really get comfortable doing things on a device that are not dangerous, because you're going to need to do those in order to be effective. So commit check is like a good command that really isn't dangerous in a lot of cases. There's always a caveat though with production gear, and that is bugs. Sometimes show interface description. There's, sometimes depending on what gear you're working on, where it came from, stuff outside of your control, that will cause the box to reboot. Like maybe it's full of, like its RAM is being overtaxed, its CPU is being overtaxed, something like that. So yeah, stuff like that happens. In my experience, if something like that happens to you and it's a bug, and you can prove it's a bug, you can document it, you're really kind of a little bit of a mortar or whatever, like a martyr. Like you're really taking the hit for the rest of the team, and that's a good thing. So if you ever have a situation like that where you lose access, you don't know why, one thing I can do in a later video is show how to set up terminal logging too, which I don't know how to do with this one. Unfortunately, I'm used to using Secure CRT, and just kind of build that record of your activities and really share that and kind of build a story that's like, look, seriously, this is all I did. I just did show configuration. I hit the Q to get out of the more prompt, and I did a show and description, and the device rebooted. That's seriously all I did. You can show that this device is suspect and really have that be widely known by your team. That's a good thing that you can do. So as I was saying before, you really got to get comfortable entering in commands that are safe. Yes, there are still times when entering a safe command can cause a problem, but in those times, you will definitely, especially by becoming more of an expert, more comfortable, more of kind of a leader amongst your team for having explored and really understood what is going on, you can be kind of vindicated through something like that, and really kind of show to everyone that, oh, it's not because I didn't understand what I was doing, it was I incompetent, it's because this device of this software version of this vendor with this configuration just randomly rebooted and there's a bug and we need to take care of the bug. So it's important to know what you're doing, and entering in commands that are safe are an important aspect of that. Can go wrong, but in those cases, you're really not going to be held at fault, especially if you can do a really good job to kind of prevent your coworkers from falling into the same pit trap and work to getting it resolved in some way as fast as possible. So here's the show interface descriptions, which I did before. So let's take a look at show in terse. So we've got that is up. So let's go back into edit interfaces G001. Oh, let's actually do a show pipe compare because, yep, yeah, I've already got it in there. So I'll do a commit now. I'll go back and I'll do, yeah, and this is something that I'll speak to as well. By default, most programs, you just highlight it and then you hit the right click and it will automatically paste it. If you're in production, get rid of that. What you're gonna do is you're gonna be using your mouse, you're gonna highlight something, and then you're gonna move your mouse to the right. It's gonna bump into your coffee cup. It's gonna bump into something, and it's gonna hit that click button, and it's gonna paste it in and reboot the router. So if you're in production, disable this feature. You do not want something that you highlighted or in your clipboard to automatically go in when you hit your when you hit any single button. You want to set up to a combination like Alt Insert or something where you've got to put that little bit of extra effort into it so that you're not going to just mindlessly, subconsciously do something really harmful. So you can see I no longer have anything in my show compare. If I do a run show in terse, like match G dash, you can see that's now down. So let's go ahead and do a roll one, and then let's do a show type compare again. And now we're gonna bring that port back up, and hopefully we'll see more OSPF traffic generate, and then we'll see the destination multicast traffic and the destination unicast traffic. So let's go ahead and put that into action here, commits. And hopefully this will start scrolling. We can also take a look at the neighbor, show up OSPF neighbor. So, okay, we're in state full still, so I guess I'm not sure why it's not scrolling. It could be, another thing could be is just there's some error where it's no longer capturing for some reason. It looks like if I clear the filter, it looks like nothing's scrolling, so there could be some other kind of issue, but it's really not relevant for now. What I think I'm gonna do, because I don't know how long this is going, I don't know any way to check that, but I have a feeling it's going pretty long now, so I'm just gonna end the video here. I think it's a pretty valuable video because I worked on the command line in production for probably like 3 years, at least 2 full years, and I came out clean. Like I didn't have any huge outages. I had a few really small ones, really small ones, but those were the kinds of things where it was kind of out of my control to really cause it, and the outcomes were very good. I worked with people who forgot the add keyword in switchboard trunk VLAN allowed add and brought down hundreds of devices. I worked with people who set up loopbacks on the wrong ports and caused broadcast storms that brought down cell towers. I worked with people that deleted the the LDP, which is the transport protocol for MPLS from entire PE devices, and I never did anything like that, and it's because of those extra steps, those extra habits that I kind of developed myself to kind of keep me always sure that I'm doing the right thing, and if anything I do happens to cause an issue, that I have a record of that, a history of that, and I can explain what I was doing when that issue was caused. So even if I did go ahead and forget the keyword add, I would know that right away. But topic for another video, I actually do have a way to prevent those entirely using auto hotkey, using ACS rules. So lots of great new content to come. But for now, I'm gonna end this here, and thank you for watching.